Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by mug.news. Gabe Munoz is an active resource for entrepreneurs in his local ecosystem. Currently, he works as the Kansas City Eship Fellow for Forward Cities, a business focused on inclusivity and innovative growth within communities across the Midwest and more. Gabe, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
No, thank you, Caitlin, for allowing me to be here today.
100%. So I figured we can just get started. And my first question for you is, how did you first become involved in your startup community?
So it's actually several decades ago. It's a longer story, but the short story is that I started getting involved in my community while I was going to school at Washburn University, and I ended up getting voluntoed to participate in putting on a festival, which is a festival that is going on called Fiesta Mexicana in Topeka, Kansas. And from there, the gentleman that I was volunteering for and built up relationships over 5 years ended up getting hired as the president and CEO of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Wow. And so when he got hired, he knew my enthusiasm for working in community, for volunteering, also my understanding and passion for entrepreneurship. And so he asked me to come work for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Greater Kansas City.
That sounds like a fantastic journey. And some people, through interviews, we find some people stumble into entrepreneurship and then vice versa. Some people come to it quite organically and naturally. So then I was going to ask you, what's one thing people don't know about your ecosystem?
There's a lot of different things, I think. I think it depends on what lens you're looking at it from. Mm-hmm. And so, the first is sometimes I've been predominantly involved in the Hispanic entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so one of the first things usually is that folks see it and they think that it's a homogeneous one fits all kind of group. And it's a very diverse ecosystem. So, there's individuals who are immigrant who moved here from another country that English tends to be their second language. And then there's individuals who were born and raised here, such as myself. And Spanish is my second language, and I learned English first. And so sometimes that I have to navigate two worlds. And so folks sometimes don't realize and understand that, having a understanding of what's going on in mainstream America, at the same time understanding what's going on for me especially, it's more in the Mexican community. And so just because I am Hispanic and I do speak Spanish, but to a limited degree, mm-hmm. I don't feel full fluency. And so sometimes folks will look at me and they see that I speak Spanish and just have this assumption that I can just take on all these roles and communicate some of these technical terms and ideologies and whatnot. And so sometimes that's, sometimes folks don't realize and understand that we're still living.
Mm-hmm. My other question then, within entrepreneurship and the startup community, there's a lot of jargon that is used. And I'm sure that language barrier comes into a little bit of difficulty. Do you have any experiences with this that you recall at all in that translation?
Yes. So, especially just actually through a survey we actually did, one of the things was that the small businesses we work with do not connect with the word entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. And so this is a term for a lot of the small businesses that when they're hearing it, they don't connect. And so when they see these resources that exist, they don't feel that it's for them. And so most of at least within the Hispanic population, they refer to the term small business. And so it's not a term that we tend to use a lot in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so that terminology right away disconnects this whole kind of group.
So you mentioned resources and availability. So that was actually leading into my next question of when starting a business in your community, are people eligible for any grants or interest-free loans?
Mm. So, yeah, there's different kind of resources that are available. So one that is very low key that a lot of folks across the state of Kansas do not know and realize, and really this kind of program exists in almost every state, is called an IDA, Individual Development Account. And so this is really included, especially it was developed for communities where there's not a lot of assets. So a lot of times, you hear the saying, it takes money to make money. And so if you're in a community where you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're not really able to save, you don't have a network of family and friends who have access to money and resources. You also don't have credit to be able to get a credit card to put your business on. You end up being able not to start. So IDA, it's a match savings account through the state of Kansas. And so for every dollar that you save, the state of Kansas matches $2. You can save up to a maximum of $3,000, meaning the state of Kansas would give you $6,000, meaning you have $9,000. And this is to be able to either start or to grow your existing business. And so it's a like I said, it's a program that is under the radars. It's really been used in the housing community to be able to for first-time home buyers, but the fund exists also for entrepreneurship, and a lot of people don't know and understand that. So that's one program that we've been really pushing for. I actually work with e-communities out of Network Kansas, which is through the Kansas Department of Commerce. And so they have a revolving loan fund, which is a GAP fund. So basically, an example is if somebody needs, let's say, $50,000 to start their business up, but that bank is willing to lend them only $40,000 and they still need that $10,000, we have access to this GAP fund that we can fill in that $10,000. Well, doing some research and reading into the legislation that went into the process to create this bill and create this fund, I was reading through it several months back, and there was a clause that said if you're able to get matching funds, you can actually give it out as a grant. And so we actually approached yesterday the Unified Government of Wyandotte County they already have a grant that they're giving out, and to see how can we use those funds to match the Unified Government's grant. And so we came to an agreement to that yesterday. And so we'll be having double the money now for the Unified Government, the WICO Loves Local grant that is available for entrepreneurs in Wyandotte County, which specifically tries to aim towards underserved communities. And so that's a local grant that has actually, up to 2 years ago, nobody ever applied for that grant. Nobody knew about it. So we've gone door to door. We shared the resources and helped people apply for that grant, and now have increased awareness. And now we've doubled the amount of resources for that grant. So that's another grant. So, but right now in COVID, I think there's a lot of other grants that have become available. Verizon just had a grant that came out a couple days ago. It was only available, unfortunately, the 8th and 9th to be able to apply for. But you have the PPP, forgivable loan, that's also available currently, that ends on March 31st. So we still have so many folks in our communities that heard the term Paycheck Protection Program, which is what PPP stands for, and they assume that you have to get a paycheck or provide somebody a paycheck in order to qualify for that. But that program actually allows sole proprietors, subcontractors, folks who are receiving a 1099 form, independent contractors, to be able to apply for that for forgivable loan. And so many people are not aware of that. And so we've actually launched a program to assist individuals with gathering their documentation and applying for that.
Congratulations on the grant conversation. That is fantastic news. And I'm really glad you could share that information with us. You had a ton of good resources financial wise. And so thank you for sharing that. This was a very exciting thing to learn about, especially the COVID resources as well. We talked about where do people find these resources? So what should, where should people look? When they first come to your community, whether that be for events, how to get started in that sense.
Yeah, so definitely, we have a lot of resources in our community. Casey SourceLink is the first one that always comes to mind. So there tend to be the one-stop shop online resource for all types of available organizations, resources, meetups, groups, and everything for entrepreneurship. So that's definitely my first recommendation there. The second is going to be I came from the chamber world, so I always recommend your local chamber, whether that's a mainstream chamber or sometimes for communities of color. We don't understand how a chamber works. And so, here in Kansas City, we're very fortunate. We have the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, which actually was the founding chamber of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And so that's a great resource. So the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce started in Kansas City. There's over 300 Hispanic chambers all across the country now. And so I always, if folks sometimes feel more comfortable speaking to somebody who maybe has a similar cultural background and understanding of different markets, diverse markets. So I recommend, whether it's the Hispanic Chamber, we have Black Chamber of Commerce. We also have the Asian Chamber of Commerce. And so we have a LGBT Chamber of Commerce as well. So I recommend jumping into one of these organizations as well. The most important thing, though, is no matter what, I think there's always two things. First, you have to learn to ask for help. And then secondly, get involved, volunteer, get engaged.
I'm so excited to learn about these diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities and resources for people. We typically see in the past, it's been white men that do entrepreneurship. And so it's very exciting to see as we've progressed through the years that we're allowing more people to come to the table and we're offering these places people can look to gain that experience and those resources. So when it comes to community building and starting that conversation, are there any coffee shops that entrepreneurs would hang out in pre-COVID and interact with people?
Yeah. There's quite a few different coffee shops. I know the Messenger coffee shop is very popular here in Kansas City. I hate to start calling out names because just as I think as just an entrepreneur ecosystem builder, coffee shops tend to be my go-to spot to meet with folks. So I have so many, just a couple that have started off that I've been frequenting that are more coffee shops of color here in town. I would say Equal Minded Cafe. I would encourage folks to support Dontavius Young there. We also have Cafe Corazon, which is a new coffee shop that opened up a little over a year ago now. And during COVID, back in August, we had it's called Windmill Cafe that opened up as well. So those have been kind of lately my go-to spots where I've been meeting folks at.
Mm-hmm. Sounds really fun. I really miss coffee shops quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to those opening up a little bit more when that comes around. So then are there any co-working spaces in your area that you recommend?
Yes. Again, I feel bad just to call one or two out. But, Gerald Smith with PlexPod has been incredible. He's from here locally. And so he runs the PlexPod, which they've just opened up a brand new space called The Cube, which is downtown Kansas City, Missouri. and so he's also he's got several other locations. One in we call it River Market, one in Crossroads, and then one in Midtown. And so I actually office out of his Midtown location. And let me tell you, the thing that I applaud Gerald for is because as COVID came around, a lot of individuals started pulling back on their membership sometimes to the co-working spaces because they're working from home. Gerald um, went and supported the community, and he's given so much back. He's been and bent over backwards to make the co-working space work for entrepreneurs. Even though it's hurt his pocketbook, and he's had to figure out how to maneuver this, he's always been about community. He's always been about entrepreneurs and supporting them. He donates so much space and time, even before COVID. He was donating space to host the 1 million cups, to host the different events with Startland News, host events for the different entrepreneurial ecosystems. And for me, it's always about action. Folks can talk about supporting entrepreneurs and whatnot, but Gerald's gone way above and beyond through his actions to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So that's my spot.
So where can people go to learn more about any events in your startup community? Do you have any Zoom events, or does Forward Cities have anything like that?
So Forward Cities has really been about how do we don't want to recreate anything that already exists. Instead, for us, it has been more about how do we bring more awareness to what's happening in the community. We have so many entrepreneurial resources already. And so how do we help elevate those programming and those resources and events so that more people become aware of them? And that's really what our focus has really been. And so we've been out in the community, even with COVID, taking some precautionary measures. We're going door to door, speaking to small businesses, making them aware, helping them with understanding how does Zoom work? How do you participate in these functions and events online, and bringing that awareness to them. And so, but my go-to resource is Casey SourceLink. Again, they have a great calendar of events for all the entrepreneurial ecosystem. The Startland News has also been a really good resource of event, and they're in the Kansas City Business Journal as well. Have some really inclusive and great events that they all are helping to share, and they're not sharing just only their events that they're putting on, but they're sharing everything that's going on in the community.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you hesitated with doing shout outs because you're very involved. So it makes it very hard on what do you choose, what to say. But my next question was, are there any notable startups from your community? If you could name a couple.
Yeah, so I'm working more with more of the micro enterprises. So they're not your high growth type of businesses, but these are I think some really great businesses that are coming up and growing. One specifically that comes to mind it's called Thunderlight Work Boots, and so that is that's a great small business here locally. And so her name is Virginia. And so Virginia started off, as a single mother, household of 3, and she started this business on the side, and she's growing tremendously, even through COVID. She provides actually work shoes for restaurants and warehouse workers, which sometimes we don't think about these really specific niche markets. And so her business has really grown tremendously. She's taken advantage of a lot of the resources that we've brought to her attention. But in addition to that, she's actually going above and beyond, and now she's making bringing awareness to her neighbors in her business community. And she goes out and speaks to them. She advocates on behalf of these programs that are taking place.
That is very inspiring to hear as well. Not another typical story. So it's good to hear all of these diverse backgrounds that are coming and succeeding. So then you mentioned her. Do you know? Do you have any other notable entrepreneurs that you have worked with in the past?
Definitely had a number of them, and a lot of the entrepreneurs that I tend to work with are B2B. So a lot of times they don't have the high notoriety. And so a lot of your main folks in mainstream won't know in a lot of these different businesses. So Infinite Energy Construction, a great small business here locally in Kansas City, but he's done an incredible job. So uh, when they put up the new TV screen, jumbo screen at the Royals, the World Series winning Royals, he put up that screen. He did all the electrical work at the Chief Stadium as well. He's done work at quite a few different military bases. And so his business has grown. Nielsen Goes with Infinite Energy Construction. I mean, he immigrated here 25 years ago from Brazil, not speaking the language, going to school, got his PhD in electrical engineering. And now he's one of the highest revenue small businesses in Kansas City. And so he actually was candidate for Entrepreneur of the Year through the SBA. And he was the Missouri Small Business of the Year. And so, I was very fortunate to work with him when he was just getting started and helping him along the way, making connections. Back in 2008, I remember working with Nelson when it was really difficult to access credit, and using our contacts to be able to help him to get access to some funding. So so he's been a really good friend.
That's very fantastic to hear, and to see that progress as it goes. So what a great feel-good story as well. So we're hitting on this topic pretty well, but I thought if you had any more ideas, and that came to you, but how do you include diversity, equity, and inclusion in your ecosystem? We've talked about quite a few of the resources that you recommended, but is there anything else that comes to mind?
I mean, to me, at times, it's just about having conversations.
Mm-hmm.
We need to go out and speak to entrepreneurs. We need to get out of our comfort zone. We can't go into this mentality of we're coming in to save a business. but I think just going out and speaking to entrepreneurs, meeting the entrepreneurs where they're at and having conversations. It's a lot of times for the entrepreneurs, they're trying to wear a lot of different hats. And they didn't go into business, to have to go out and to network, to have to learn all the tax rules, to become an HR manager and professional or legal professional. They have that skill and passion and that's the reason they went into business. And so sometimes they don't know that maybe they're not making the best decision, or they don't know that a resource exists. And it's through the conversations. Entrepreneurs a lot of times they already have a long list of to do things, and so coming in and telling an entrepreneur, well, you need to do this and that, sometimes doesn't work because they already have the long list of things to do. And so it's sometimes, how do you help? And not by giving them a list to do, but how do you help them by doing something that can help them? For some of the entrepreneurs, one specifically that comes to mind, he owns Quality Framing and Arts in Merriam, Kansas, and he got started back in January, right before the pandemic. And one of the things we did for him was we just got him set up on Google Places. It's a very simple, short win. For some of us who grew up in the technology age, it's something very easy to do. For this gentleman who immigrated here and didn't really grow up with technology, it was something out of his realm that he didn't know and understand. Mm-hmm. But through COVID, the Google Places has been his number one resource of getting business. He's now got like 25 reviews on there, all of them 5-star ratings. And he's literally told me that if it wasn't for that Google Places listing, his business would not be in business any longer. And that Google Places listing has given him so much business. People have confidence in reading what other folks have left behind on there and seeing that. And so sometimes it's just about doing little things for entrepreneurs like that, whether it's leaving a review or giving them the Google Places place. but we all have a place in a role that we can play and support entrepreneurs.
One thing that I've made an observation on is being that it's been COVID, everyone understands and recognizes that times are tough. In my experience, people have been going out of their way to find small businesses and support them, whether that's through takeout or supporting more locals, so buying handbags and such. Have you noticed that as well? And also you kind of experience like with the Google Places, that really helps his business as well.
Yeah, I think I've seen folks try to more purposely spend local and identify those small businesses, which is great to see. Because especially now, even still to this day, we have small businesses that are still struggling. For quite a few, especially those in retail, the holiday season is their biggest season, and they were, for quite a few of them, they were still way below what they typically have sold, and that's typically what's helped sustain them throughout the year. And so I encourage folks to continue to Google Places for me has been a really great place to just find and continue to explore. Even though we're going through COVID, we still have quite a few businesses opening up, and in fact, it's sometimes has become because of necessity that folks have opened up a business. And so I encourage folks to get out of, whether it's your comfort zone or just look and explore for a new product or service, and use Google to see who you can come up with. And if you don't see your favorite local business on there, I encourage you to help them with getting found on Google Places.
Those are some really helpful, good action statements as well. As we, this is one of my last couple questions. So you'd mentioned some other news media outlets on how people can get more educated, more involved. Do you have any other recommendations to check out, like any podcasts or any other news blogs that cover startups?
Yeah. So we got the Startup Hustle podcast, which is great here. It's locally created here in Kansas City. I personally follow just some of the local organizations in town on social media. So the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has been really great and incredible to get information from. The Prospect Business Association, and that's through Facebook, where you can follow them. The Central Avenue Betterment Association has been an incredible source of, and so it's really, and those are really at the hyper micro level, where you can get a lot of information of what's happening within the neighborhood. So those have really been a lot of great go-to resources. But at the same time, the SBDC, the Kansas SBDC Small Business Development Center, out at Johnson County Community College, KC SourceLink. I'm also tagged in with Network Kansas, which is another great resource to plug into the Kansas City BizCare office. I'm on a lot of email lists. So just automatically, I think when I kick off my day, I'm almost about a dozen emails deep, just from the resource partners and organizations that exist, and SCORE is the other one. I think they do all of those organizations. I think if you plug in just each one of those, you're going to be in the know of what's going on here in Kansas City, though. But I think in every city, you have very similar organizations that you could plug into.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those. Again, mug.news has a newsletter too, so I might send that to you as well.
Oh, I can add one more, definitely.
And then I'll definitely add a couple of those to mine as well. It's very great way to get some of like that interest going, and that way you can go out and get more information as well. So before we wrap up, I was going to ask, do you have any passing final thoughts or advice to give to the listeners?
Yeah, let's continue to support our entrepreneurs. I think right now, especially if you know an entrepreneur and they don't know about the Paycheck Protection Program, make them aware of that. Help them with that process and getting that information, because to me, it's a program that a lot of larger companies have taken advantage of, but there's so many small businesses that still are unaware of it and have not applied. Mm-hmm. And so that program is going to end on March 31st, and they provide a forgivable loan as long as you use it to pay for salaries or income of the owners. You can also use it to pay for like your past due mortgage or rent. You can use it for utilities. It's forgivable. And so it's the one program that I'm pushing consistently right now.
Well, Gabe, thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to talking to my co-host, Nick, right after this.
All right. No, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from the person building it, I'm going to link back up with Caitlin to clarify some jargon and take a deeper dive into this community.
Caitlin, how was your conversation with Gabe?
It went so well. I feel like he gave such great answers, right? So he went into detail about so many different things. We talked a lot about grants and loans, and I definitely learned a lot from those details, those resources that are available.
Yes, yeah, the grants and loans, I guess, market or whatever that like thing to do as an entrepreneur, it gets super tricky. And I think sometimes like people's expectations are super high that like, oh, there's a grant for everything that I'll just apply and get free money, but it doesn't always work like that. So what were some of the your biggest takeaways of having like this nuanced conversation?
Of course. So one of the things that I took away, so he works very heavily in working with minorities and offering all these resources as well. So he is Hispanic, but English is his first language, Spanish is his second. And he talked about how sometimes there are these expectations on him. People make assumptions that he knows Spanish very well, and they put a lot of this communicative pressure on him. So from a social perspective, I thought that that was a great point and a great thing to bring up, is that not to assume something. And again, that asking questions, we shouldn't be afraid to ask the questions, because that takes away the assumption. We really shouldn't be assuming things about people. So that was like a social standpoint that stood out to me about talking with Gabe.
Yes, yeah. What's interesting, Emmy, my girlfriend, who you've met, Caitlin.
Yes.
She is she's like of Mexican descent too. So like I've seen that a lot with her, that she doesn't speak Spanish, and people will like approach her and just start speaking Spanish off the like right out of the gate, and just like making those like broad assumptions about people is just never like the way to go about things. So it's cool to I guess hear that that was highlighted in the conversation. Yeah. Was there any jargon or anything you had to look up after?
Well, actually, I was pretty excited to get to this question. So now we did not have actual words of jargon, but we talked about the concept of jargon. So he explained that some entrepreneurs who are getting started, like the mom and pop shops, they don't consider themselves entrepreneurs because they're not familiar with the terms and definitions. And so he was explaining to me that some people don't reach out to the resources because they think that they're not for them. And he really drove home, again, the big theme from this is ask questions and reach out. And that was something that stood out to me, and of the jargon concept. So it was more the concept.
Yes, yeah, and I guess like in the tech community building, which is what this show is all about, that like traditionally that has been like the white male dude bro hangout session, and again, like traditionally that like minority communities have not been, I guess, like felt welcome in that, and like it's important, and like bridging that and like learning from one another and creating that like a sense of inclusion and belonging is super important. And it is again just like fascinating / inspiring to see someone working on that, and like empowering everyone to like be the best that they can be in the entrepreneurial space. So anything else, Caitlin, to touch on before we read it out?
Well, we're kind of on the same page. That was what I was going to bring up, is that I really enjoyed his perspective. I'm not of Spanish descent. So it was very interesting to get to hear about the language barrier of certain groups of people, and then offering ways for resources. And then also from Gabe's personal experience of not assuming people's culture, not assuming what they know and don't know, because it's not appropriate. And I thought it was very helpful for him to share that personal experience. So thanks for asking. That's what I took away.
Yes, yeah. Like, wonderful job interviewing like someone of like, we definitely want to like highlight different perspectives and different communities, and like that's been a huge focus from like us as the hosts. So nice work on landing the interview.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Nick. Yeah. I suppose if you're ready, you can go ahead and read us out.
Yes, of course. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder Podcast, which is a product of mug.news and hosted by myself, Nick Kastner, and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us on Twitter. I'm having trouble reading today. At Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share it with your friends. We release episodes every single Wednesday morning, so make sure to subscribe and don't miss a beat.